welcome back to another enlightening episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're going to be diving into the cutting-edge world of Wi-Fi 7, because today is the day of Qualcomm's Wi-Fi 7 event in sunny San Diego. But the good news is we're in for an exclusive look at what's next in the realms of connectivity, broadband and networking, because I've been able to grab Ganesh and Javier from Qualcomm, the minds behind these revolutionary technologies, as they unveil some of the main enhancements of Wi-Fi 7 at the event. And from higher connections and adaptability to innovative new features and interference puncturing and multi-link capabilities, we're going to explore today how Qualcomm is driving unparalleled experiences in both home and enterprise networks. So grab a seat, buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to San Diego as we prepare to navigate through the intricacies of this exciting technological frontier. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Neil, for having us on the podcast. My name is Ganesh Swaminathan. I work as a Vice President, General Manager for the Wireless Infrastructure Networking Business Unit at Qualcomm. We build silicon, software, and cloud solutions that goes into gateways, enterprise access points, mesh devices, basically however way you want to get internet in your home or your enterprise environment. We provide the silicon, software, and cloud solutions for that. Thanks for having me.
My name is Javier del Prado, and I'm a Vice President and General Manager for mobile connectivity at Qualcomm. So similar to Ganesh, we deliver the silicon and the software on the mobile side. So everything which is smartphones, tablets, and of course our solutions also extend to other client devices like computers, right? So all that is what we manage on the mobile connectivity.
Well, it's a huge honor to have you both on the podcast today, especially because it is a huge day for Qualcomm. We're going to be talking about all things Wi-Fi 7. There's the Wi-Fi 7 event over in San Diego today. And I'm curious, just to set the scene really on behalf of everybody listening. We'll have people listening in 165 different countries. What are the most significant enhancements that Wi-Fi 7 brings to the table compared to, let's say, its predecessors? And how do you see it revolutionizing home and enterprise networks? Because a lot of people listening will hear Wi-Fi 7. It'd be great to hear more about what it's delivering to both people in their homes and in their businesses.
Sure. So maybe, Neil, I take that one to start. So maybe before I talk about the Wi-Fi features, let's just understand what is happening on the Wi-Fi world, right? I think what it's important to understand are the use cases. Use cases that we see today in Wi-Fi are creating demand for higher throughput and lower latencies. We have demand for immersive experiences like screencasting and like VR or AR, which are emerging applications. Now, a common characteristic of those is that they require higher throughputs of what we offer, traditionally with Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6 solutions. And they also require consistent low latency to guarantee a user experience. If you're running, for example, AR or VR, and you want to make sure that the latency between the server that is creating the content and the display, it's as low as possible in order to guarantee an immersive user experience. So with those user experiences and with those needs that the Wi-Fi is driving, then, we can see how Wi-Fi 7 is addressing those. So I would say that there are 2 or 3 pillars of Wi-Fi 7, deliver. Number one is higher connections. And it achieved higher connections through 2 key features. Number one is increased bandwidth. So Wi-Fi 7 delivers 320 megahertz of bandwidth, which is twice the bandwidth available in Wi-Fi 6 or 6E. Okay. And the second one, it also increased the modulation, decoding technique. And Wi-Fi 7 deliver 4K QAM as the highest decoding technique. Compared to Wi-Fi 6, where, for reference, Wi-Fi 6 was 1K, that represents 20% increased throughput. Okay, so that's number one. Number second pillar, I would say, is adaptability. And that's a very important factor. as we drive for higher bandwidths, we need to make sure that we deliver techniques that allow us to use that higher bandwidth as often as possible. And, the higher the bandwidth, the more likely that you find other users in that bandwidth that you want to use and other users that are not capable of using that bandwidth. So one of the features that Wi-Fi 7 introduced to address that is what we call interference puncturing. And that is the capability to, for example, out of 120 megahertz bandwidth, if you have an interference in a portion of that bandwidth, you're able to cope with that interference and still use the wider bandwidth. So that's number two. And number three, maybe the most important and innovative feature that Wi-Fi 7 delivered is what we call the multiple connections, the capability to transmit using multiple links, either simultaneous or alternating, right? That's what we call multi-link in Wi-Fi 7. And I think we'll talk a bit more through the podcast today. Ganesh, if there's anything else that you would like to add to those three pillars?
No, I think Javier summarizes, right? So for all the listeners out there, so obviously Wi-Fi is the way how you access the internet, right? So it's always best to have faster connections, which 320 megahertz and 4K QAM representing those faster connections for you. Javier also talked about, multi-link, which is the first time we have carrier aggregation equivalent on Wi-Fi. So for people familiar with cellular technology, obviously carrier aggregation has been there for a long time. But in wireless or Wi-Fi specifically, we have the ability to deliver now across multiple bands, higher performance throughput expectations, as well as meeting latency, and also to maximize in the midst of interference. So those are the three pillars that Javier talked about. Now there was a question earlier, Neil, that you asked about how it applies from a home and enterprise network standpoint. So maybe I can touch upon that a little bit. So when you look at home, right, ultimately what matters is, you signed up for a service, you want access instantaneously, right? Whether it's, connecting or, gaming or watching a video or, whatever else that you want to do around home. Clearly the ability to, get that to you faster because of the, 320 megahertz bandwidth or higher throughput, ability to get that at the ultra low latency, which, between throughput and the multi-link capability, Wi-Fi 7 allows you to do that. And then doing it in the context of, congestion in your home. As more and more users use Wi-Fi, probably in our own homes, we all have, and this is something a lot of people talk about, 15, 20, 30 devices in a home that's Wi-Fi, right? And then count your neighbors in, all of a sudden your Wi-Fi needs to, go across 100 different users using it at any given time within your home as well as around your home through your neighbors. Then what's the best way to maximize the interference coming from all these devices and yet deliver these faster connections at the rate at which you want, at the area where you want, and have a seamless experience? That's what Wi-Fi 7 brings to the home. Same thing can be extended for the enterprise. So maybe it's not the 320 megahertz, for example, that's the game changer for enterprise. It's, I would say, the other two factors, which is multi-link operation, which is the aggregation or the ability to handle higher throughput or low latency, depending on the use case, and also the ability to, manage the interference. Because in an enterprise deployment, you do have multiple access points, depending on the density of access points that's needed to support your environment. Even though there is cell planning that happens, always technology can come in to help those IT managers manage the enterprise deployments, depending on the type of interference, type of devices, and the capability that's expected on those devices. So Wi-Fi 7 brings in a huge leap of technology for those environments and makes the job easier for the folks who actually manage the Wi-Fi.
Incredibly exciting time at the moment. And there's a lot of excitement as well coming out of the event around high band simultaneous multi-link. We've mentioned multi-link a couple of times, and I'm conscious that those words will excite a lot of techies listening around the world, but equally, there might be a few home users that may think it sounds like something Doc Brown would say in Back to the Future. So make sure we don't leave anybody behind today. Can you elaborate on the concept of high band simultaneous multi-link and how it ultimately sets Wi-Fi 7 apart from previous versions?
Sure. I'll be glad to talk about the high band simultaneous multi-link. Is one of the key features for us on PassConnect 7800, which is our Wi-Fi 7 client. So as we talked about, one of the key features that the Wi-Fi 7 introduced is multi-link. And there are multiple flavors of multi-link, right? For example, you can have multi-link between 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz band, right? That's what typical applications that we see in the market do. But we thought differently. We thought differently about this. As I was talking about the use cases that we talked about, we have applications that demand higher throughputs and demand, most importantly, sustained low latency. When you have those applications and you want to make use that you want to make sure, that you use your prime spectrum, right? Prime spectrum available, a spectrum that can guarantee that low latency. And what high band simultaneous does is precisely that. So what we can offer is the capability to aggregate 5 and 6 or 5 and 5 or 6 and 6 channels into the high band in order to guarantee low latency. If you compare to other applications that use 2.4 and 5, 2.4 today is a congested environment. There are many Wi-Fi devices today using 2.4 gigahertz band, but there are also many other applications using the 2.4 gigahertz band. For example, Thread, Bluetooth, and many other technologies that use that spectrum. And it's very difficult to transmit without interference in the 2.4 gigahertz band. And when you have that high demand for low latency, you want to make sure that you move that traffic to high band. Okay. So high band simultaneous multi-link is capable of aggregating those two channels, and those two channels on the high band, and that's a unique feature that we offer in Fast Connect 7800. There are other applications, and let me maybe expand a bit more on your question. There are other applications that may not use the capability to aggregate, but they still need high band simultaneous. So those applications, for example, when you look at your phone today, we see that the phone is connected to more devices, to more peripheral devices. The phone is today connected to your laptop, is connected to a screen, is connected to your watch, is connected to your earbuds. It has multiple connections simultaneously. Those applications, again, require the low latency that we've been talking about. And if the smartphone is connected to an access point and it was to run an application that requires low latency, for example, you want to screencast to a monitor, or you want to display the game that you're playing in your phone, you want to display that into a bigger screen, which is, some of the use cases that our key partner Xiaomi showed earlier today. Now you have your smartphone in the center of the experience. Your smartphone is connected to an access point and at the same time has a very demanding connection to a screen, right? You need to guarantee low latency across the link between the access point all the way to the screen. And in order to do that, you want to make sure that it's using, again, bandwidth and it's using channels that are clean in order to guarantee that user experience. So high band HBS, high band simultaneous, allows us to do that. It allows us to enable a connection to the access point on the high band, and at the same time, on the other link, being able to also sustain a high band connection to your screen. Once you have that end-to-end 5 and, both channels on the 5 and 6 gigahertz band, we can guarantee the latency that is required for those applications.
Makes perfect sense. And I'm curious, there's a lot of excitement about the future at the moment, but how at Qualcomm do you envision the integration of Wi-Fi 7 with things like fiber connectivity, 10G PON, and how will this integration ultimately benefit end users? Anything you can share around this too?
Absolutely. So I think from an infrastructure perspective, if you think about, what are some of the access mechanisms, right? So traditionally we are used to, a DSL giving you the internet in your home, or a cable modem, right? Most people are familiar with that. There's another way to get, connectivity to the home, which is fiber, right? Those are all what we call as fixed line broadband access technologies. And then over the last, several years, 5G coming in to deliver these wireless services through what we call as the fixed wireless access mechanisms. So if you look at all the different ways a consumer can gain access to the internet, it can be broadly classified into fixed broadband class services, as well as, cellular or Wi-Fi wireless services using 5G. Now, amongst these different technologies, definitely, as the operators are trying to, bring in a value-added service experience to the consumers, it doesn't matter what type of access type you want. The problem they're trying to solve is how do we deliver these value-added experience in a seamless manner? Because when a consumer accesses service, they pay for, service. They don't pay for how they get the internet access into the home, typically, right? So the reason I say all that is when the user signs up for these services, you have connectivity that's coming into the home through this infrastructure, which is either a fixed line or a cellular. And a fixed line, fiber is becoming that fixed line broadband of choice, especially with the infrastructure investments around 10 gig, for example. 5G is already in that position to deliver that 10 gig. So now all of a sudden you have 10 gig infrastructure connectivity coming into your home, right? And then it translates into a gateway that then connects over Wi-Fi and delivers those services in your home. So that's kind of the, I would say, east to west infrastructure, if you will, in terms of access to how the internet comes to you as a consumer. Now, with respect to PON or 10 gig fiber in this case, as I mentioned earlier, so fiber is becoming the fixed line broadband of choice. And when it's 10 gig connectivity all around your home, you want Wi-Fi that's going to go toe-to-toe and in fact delivers the best-in-class user experience based on some of the pillars we talked about. So you have a 10 gig connection that's coming into your home, whether you're using a single gateway to cover the entire home or a mesh network where there's multiple access points giving you the internet throughout your home. You want your Wi-Fi to take advantage of the 10 gig speeds that you're paying for and then deliver it to the devices simultaneously where you want it, how you want it, and where do you want to use it, right? So we envision bringing that connectivity pieces together on our platforms where you bring in this 10 gig fiber and ensure the best-in-class connectivity on Wi-Fi actually delivers those user experiences to the consumer. So that's how we see those things kind of coming together. Qualcomm has done this a long time in terms of Ethernet gateways, mesh, and fixed wireless access. Now, as with the announcement this morning from Revol, as the viewers would have heard, we also now in fiber. So Qualcomm has 10 gig fiber. So in addition to the 5G assets, we have the fiber assets in the home. So we can provide a holistic broadband experience where a fixed line broadband connection through fiber that comes in can deliver that 10 gig services seamlessly throughout the home.
Wow, it really does feel like somewhat of a game changer for broadband providers as well. And again, to bring this to life for home users, how would you say it enhances a subscriber's quality of experience, especially for those specific applications that we all enjoy? And I mean, things like 4K gaming, Ultra HD streaming of those countless streaming options that we've all got and almost just expect to work and don't want to have a buffering situation halfway through. Is there anything you can share around that and how it enhances those experiences?
Absolutely. So I think before I answer that question, maybe I can take a step back and then start looking at some of the trends. And I wanted to give some context to our listeners as well as to, what are the trends that we see in the industry and why it's relevant for us to deliver the experience that they so desire. If you look at the key trends driving some kind of a transformation in the home, right, there's demand for high performance real-time applications. And as Javier and I talked about in the context of Wi-Fi 7 earlier in the podcast, it means, the ability to deliver the ultra low latency, meaning instantaneously you get what you want, right? You want high reliability. So you want to get what you want, but in a highly reliable manner. And then you need to have the capacity and performance capabilities for high throughput applications around the home, right? And you mentioned earlier, like if you look at what's driving the traffic and the growth of traffic within the home or in any place where the traffic is consumed, you're looking at applications like emerging AR, VR, and XR, right? You're looking at a hybrid work environment, whether you're working from home or you're working from the enterprise and still having video calls with your colleagues that are working from home, or streaming and gaming, the use case that you brought up earlier. Right. So those are some of the trends which are very well known in the industry. All of us are part of and driving those actually moving forward. So the industry has responded in multiple ways, right? So initially during the pandemic and since then as well, people have appreciated and they view access or the service provider are being rated actually by the experience of Wi-Fi in your home. So which means that people have gotten premium retail mesh Wi-Fi. They felt like good experience means good Wi-Fi, premium Wi-Fi. So there was a surge towards premium Wi-Fi buy-in over the last few years, ever since the pandemic and the work from home environment started. Carriers were not left behind either, right? With some government funding, but people took the opportunity to upgrade the infrastructure, whether it's investments in fiber, investments in fixed wireless access, or investments in delivery of quality user experience. It doesn't matter. The digital transformation at the carrier started, right? So when I look at all that, there are still certain broadband challenges, because as a consumer, you want to have a seamless way to access whatever you want to access. You don't really worry about whether you're getting access through a fixed line or through a wireless 5G line. It doesn't really matter. At the end of it, you want the experience the way you need it. It has to be seamless, whether you're 5G or fixed broadband, and independent of the type of device that you use. I may not have the latest and greatest clients, right? I may have a Wi-Fi 5 technology-based client, a Wi-Fi 6, 6E, or even a newer Wi-Fi 7. But ultimately, I'm paying for a service, and that service means independent of the technology that I have on the client, independent of how I subscribe to the service, I pay for the experience, and that's what I would like to do. That's what I would like to have. So what that means is a carrier, in order to meet this expectation, has to be in a position to ideally manage the end-to-end experience. Oftentimes, they manage until the point of the gateway, right? And after that, it's kind of, your mileage may vary. Sometimes people buy additional devices from the carrier, but most times they go and buy from Best Buy or Amazon or any other place they want, right? Especially as you look at IoT clients and other clients, that kind of takes into that picture. So this creates an additional amount of effort the carrier has to now go through. And then if there is any issue, guess who the consumer calls? They call the carrier. So they don't control the end-to-end network, but they get the calls. And as such, the user experience and the brand value dilutes in consumers' mind. So we need to take these to the next level and define what does the next generation broadband experience mean? And that's kind of how we ended up with this repositioning the home gateway. We feel it needs to be independent of how the access comes into the home, whether it's 5G or fiber. You need a gateway that has the intelligence, is software-led, developer-first kind of a model, right? That provides insights, it provides the programmability and the end-to-end orchestration capability for the carrier, and then is service-aware in terms of the types of clients, what's happening in the network, and then puts it all together. So we felt like gone are the days where gateway is just purely a connectivity demarcation. Now it is here to stay, where it can be that programmable, intelligent platform that can deliver end-to-end orchestration for the carrier.
Incredibly cool. And of course, something else that really caught my eye was the ability to provide actionable insights into a subscriber's applications and their devices. So are you able to expand on how SD Wi-Fi empowers broadband providers to more proactively resolve issues and minimize those operational costs? Because again, a big topic, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, SD Wi-Fi stands for service-defined Wi-Fi. Now, we have, in the past, earlier in the podcast as well, right, we've all talked about how these user experiences are important. And when you look at user experience, what does that really mean? It means delivering the service that you want on a given client at the rate at which you want it, right? So if you think about that, service-defined Wi-Fi tries to bring in that perspective of service awareness of the client, of the network, to the carrier, right? And then allows the carrier to not just ensure the services get to the client in a deterministic manner, but also allows the carrier to manage end-to-end. If you take a step back, what are the expectations, if you will, for an operator, right? They want to ensure that whatever policy they drive through for the carrier, for the consumer, if you paid for a 10 gig service, there is a policy. The carrier actually tells your access device or the gateway here, this is what the subscriber is signed up to, make sure you deliver to that. So the operator actually pushes the policy to the gateway, but it doesn't translate beyond the gateway into wireless, right? Because wireless is not a wired medium. It dynamically changes based on interference, based on the number of clients, the type of clients and type of traffic and so forth. So not only do you need to ensure the policies that are getting into the gateway actually goes all the way to the end device, but you also need to be in a position to dynamically adapt to changing network conditions, right? And then When you do all of that, you still need to ensure there are different applications that may be running on different clients simultaneously. Somebody may be watching a video, somebody may be doing gaming, somebody may be doing just best effort or a teleconference call, like whatever we are ending up doing. There are different types of applications. So in a changing environment like wireless, you want to be in a position to still be aware of the application and then deliver the service appropriately to that particular client. And we already talked about there are different types of clients. So you cannot have a consumer have a Wi-Fi 5 client, and just because he or she has a Wi-Fi 5 client, the experience is so low versus, hey, you need to migrate to Wi-Fi 7. Yes, the consumer would be interested, but you don't want to be in a position to force the consumer to upgrade the latest and greatest devices all the time. As a service provider, you want the consumer to upgrade the gateway, and all of a sudden your entire Wi-Fi experience just became so good. The consumer really appreciates what you brought to the table. And then the last but not least, you want to be in a position to demonstrate that experience improvements as well, right? It's one thing to say, look, I'm going to deliver the service. It's the other thing to actually, tell the consumer, look, your service went X% better, right? 50% better on this. You are able to do more Wi-Fi for the same service that you signed up for. If you look at it, these are the operator expectations. And in order to make this happen, there has to be a way to make wireless more deterministic. Wireless become and operate and function like a wire. And that's what service-defined Wi-Fi does. It provides the capability for the operator to treat Wi-Fi as a wireline communication transport layer, if you will, right? So we have brought in algorithms and techniques that allows the operator to engage, interface, and program the Wi-Fi in a way that it's much more deterministic, and it is service aware and delivers that consumer experience that the operator wants.
Incredibly cool. And I've also read that Qualcomm SD Wi-Fi has been described as a catalyst for broadband provider innovation. So if we take a look under the hood for a moment and maybe geek out for a few minutes, can you tell me more about its API-first architecture and how that can foster innovation, especially for third-party application developers that could be listening?
Absolutely. And, Qualcomm has been a technology company, right? Our goal is to partner with operators around the world in bringing in their service innovations the way they want it, which means, as a baseline, we have silicon and software solutions that we would more expose the API for different service providers to take advantage of those APIs, whatever applications they're already running or they would like to be running going forward. They are in a position to look at a common layer of APIs for Qualcomm-based silicon and software so that it can be consistent across any number of devices they put out there. And it's consistent in terms of how you program the Wi-Fi going forward, right? So we felt an API-first developer-led mindset is what we need to bring to the table for Wi-Fi in order for the service providers to take advantage of this holistically. And once we do that, we anticipate service providers to start looking at bringing this glue in terms of the innovations they're already doing in middleware, for example. Pair that up with the API-first approach, as you heard this morning. This brings a holistic end-to-end experience that service providers can bring to the table. And best yet, it's not a one-device thing. Since it's consistent, APIs and the layers in which how they interact with the middleware, how they interact with Qualcomm Silicon across our Networking Pro series and our immersive home portfolio, carriers get a consistent experience, look and feel, and as a result, it turns into a consistent user experience, look and feel for the end consumer, because that's how the applications interact with the silicon and software. That's how the entire Wi-Fi is orchestrated to deliver that service experience to the consumer.
And another big takeaway from the event here is the Qualcomm Services Gateway platform seems to be repositioning the home gateway as more than just a connectivity point. So can you discuss this role in things like revenue growth and service innovations, especially in the context of 10G broadband technologies and Wi-Fi 7?
Absolutely. And I think it's a great question. It actually summarizes a lot of things we have been talking in the podcast so far. Earlier, I mentioned about, service providers, had seen the gateways as more of fixed function devices, which means they've had limited exposure in terms of bringing value-added services, in terms of the ability to actually translate those services and program it over Wi-Fi and orchestrate end-to-end the user experience. With the ability to bring in the best-in-class Wi-Fi 7 technology which is the silicon, right? And then the access technology, which is either 5G or fiber, right? And the software that sits on top of that with service-defined Wi-Fi or SD Wi-Fi, we now provide a whole complete platform for the carriers, independent of the access mechanism, independent of the type of Wi-Fi platform tiering, if you will, whether it's the Networking Pro Series or the immersive platform from Qualcomm, a consistent service-defined Wi-Fi API layer, and then the ability to interact with the middleware, provide the actionable insights and cloud metrics, if you will. We provide end-to-end holistic broadband platform. And that, I believe, is a game changer, as you outlined. And it is repositioning the gateway from simply a connectivity vehicle to a service access vehicle or service gateway vehicle, which is exactly the whole point of our services. Gone are the days where you offer a gateway and deliver connectivity and let the users worry about Wi-Fi. We now provide the service provider an opportunity to manage end-to-end and deliver the services and orchestrate the values, quality of user experience.
And just to understand how it all works, given that SD Wi-Fi is independent of network access technology, I'm curious, how does it ensure consistent and seamless performance, whether a user is on fiber or 5G? Because I suspect that's a big question for many people listening as well.
Absolutely. And I think the way we realized, as I mentioned earlier, the two big access mechanisms are 5G and fiber from a fixed broadband standpoint. When we envisioned SD Wi-Fi, our goal was to address exactly the question that you're asking, which is how do we ensure there's consistency in terms of how we interact with the different types of access technologies, and how does that experience translate? So we've defined the APIs in a way that irrespective of whether you have a fiber-based access or a 5G-based access, the ability for the service providers to translate the policy that they're trying to pull together and map it over Wi-Fi is well defined. So as over the next, several months and years, as operators work with Qualcomm solutions and bring products to market, they would see a consistent definition of SD Wi-Fi that can be leveraged across the different platforms, independent of access, and thereby taking advantage of this experience for consumers throughout the home.
Well, a huge thank you to both of you today for talking about all the big news stories coming out of the Wi-Fi 7 day, but in a language that everyone can understand. And I think there's so many takeaways for people, whether they're in enterprises, whether they're home users, so many big talking points. And there'll be a lot of people listening wanting to find out more information about everything we talked about, whether it be the announcements, whether it be about the technology. And I appreciate Qualcomm is a huge website too. So anyone wanting to find out more information, contact your team, etc., where would you like to point everyone listening today?
So we have actually a lot of different demos that are happening right now in the event. So I encourage the team to actually come in and see through that. There will be some, information that will be made available around some of those capabilities, websites, which that's something that the consumers as well as operators, our customers can come in and take a look at as well.
Well, again, we covered so much in a short amount of time, and there's so much information out there today. And I know how busy you are today, back to back in interviews, talking about this stuff again and again. And I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come away from a few moments and share all the big stories coming out of that Wi-Fi 7 event. But just thank you so much for taking the time today. Appreciate you both. And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Wi-Fi 7 with today's guests from Qualcomm. We covered everything from high-band simultaneous multi-links to fiber connectivity. And I think we uncovered how these innovations are ultimately enhancing internet access, reducing latency, and paving the way for more immersive user experiences. And from Qualcomm's groundbreaking service-defined Wi-Fi, and I loved hearing about Qualcomm's groundbreaking service-defined Wi-Fi and that mission to redefine subscriber quality, enable new revenue streams maybe, and foster innovation within the broadband industry. And for all those reasons combined, I think it's clear that they're not just keeping up with technological advancements, they seem to be leading the charge. So again, I'd like to extend my gratitude to today's guests for sharing their insights and giving us all a glimpse to the future of connectivity. And giving us all a glimpse into the future of connectivity. And they have been incredibly busy today, back-to-back interviews for that Wi-Fi 7 day in San Diego. So very privileged to get them on the show. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today. We did cover a lot, and it's maybe got you thinking about things. Maybe you got questions, extra discussion points, Maybe you want to come on the podcast. Maybe you want to ask more questions. Whatever it is, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. And if you or your business need help with thought leadership articles, whether they be ghostwritten, whether they be in my name, you need business blogs, or you want to launch your own podcast, you want to work with me, I can make all that happen. You can just focus on having interviews. I'll make sure everything goes out and is edited each week. For all those things, techblogwriter.co.uk, that's my website. But that's it for our time in San Diego today. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.